Warning, this is a sweet story. Please subscribe. In the heart of the savannah, where the earth is the color of crushed copper, and the sun commands the sky, there stood a tree. But this was no ordinary tree. This was the great Baobab of Kundi, so ancient that its roots drank from the memories of the ancestors. The elders said the tree could talk, but for generations it had remained silent. Until Anya. Anya was an orphan, born without the ability to speak a single word. In a village that loved to gossip, laugh, and sing, Anya lived in a world of quiet. The villagers pitied her. A broken vessel, they would whisper, but Anya wasn't broken. She was a listener. She listened to the rhythm of the rain, the gossip of the weaver birds, and the deep, low hum of the earth itself. One evening, during the worst drought the land had seen in 100 years, the village streams dried to dust. The crops withered like old leather. Desperate, the villagers gathered under the great Baobab to pray. They chanted, they drummed, they shouted to the sky. Nothing happened. The air remained hot and dead. When the villagers left in despair, Anya stayed behind. She walked up to the massive, wrinkled trunk of the baobab. She didn't have words, so she did the only thing she could. She placed her palms against the bark, closed her eyes, and began to hum. It wasn't just a sound. It was a melody of everything she had ever listened to. The wind, the dust, the heartbeat of the soil. Then the ground trembled. The massive bark of the baobab began to shift. A voice, deep as a rumbling earthquake, echoed from the hollow trunk. For 100 years I have heard the demands of the loud, the tree whispered. But I have waited for the one who understands the silence. The tree opened its great wooden palm, and out spilled a single, glowing blue seed, the last seed of the rain tree. Plant this in the center of the village. The baobab commanded Anya. But remember, water will not make it grow. It feeds only on the truth of a pure heart. Anya ran back to the village square and planted the glowing seed. The villagers gathered around, laughing in disbelief. How can a seed grow in dead dirt? They mocked. But Anya stood over the seed. She opened her mouth, and for the first time in her life, she didn't just hum. She sang. Her voice wasn't human. It was the sound of rolling thunder, of rushing rivers, of cool night air. It was a golden voice born from a lifetime of listening. She sang of the village's pain, of her own loneliness, and of her fierce love for her people. As her voice pierced the night sky, the blue seed erupted from the dirt. It grew into a magnificent tree in seconds, its leaves unfurling like green silk. And then the clouds broke. Rain poured down, washing away the dust, filling the riverbeds, and bringing the dead crops back to life. The villagers fell to their knees, weeping and washing their faces in the cool water. They looked at Anya, not with pity, but with awe. From that day on, Anya became the storyteller of Kundi. She never spoke a word of gossip or small talk. But when the village needed guidance, she would sing, and the people finally learned what Anya had always known, that sometimes the most powerful voice in the world is the one that knows how to listen. For many moons, the village of Kundi thrived. The rivers stayed full, and Anya's golden voice kept the peace. But prosperity is like a sweet fruit. It doesn't just attract friends. It attracts the hungry. Word of the girl who sang the rain into existence traveled far beyond the savannah, crossing the jagged mountains. to the kingdom of the Iron King. King Yarrow was a man whose heart had turned to stone from greed. He had cut down every forest in his own land to build weapons and palaces, leaving his people starving and his soil dead. When he heard of Anya, his eyes burned with envy. "Bring me this girl," he commanded his generals. "If she can force the heavens to bleed water, she will make my empire unstoppable." One fateful night, when the moon hid behind a blanket of clouds, a shadow fell over Kandy. Before the villagers could sound the horn, King Yarrow's raiders swept through the huts. They did not steal gold or cattle. They stole Anya. They threw her into an iron cage and dragged her away, leaving Kandy in a cloud of dust and terror. The next morning, Anya awoke in the center of the Iron King's desolate courtyard. Thousands of starving citizens stared at her through the iron bars, their eyes hollow with desperation. High above them on his balcony, King Yarrow looked down like a vulture. "Sing, girl," the king bellowed, throwing a handful of dead dirt into her cage. "Command the clouds to rain upon my kingdom, or you will rot in this cage." Anya gripped the cold iron bars. She looked at the sky, but the sky here felt distant, choked by the smoke of the king's furnaces. She looked at the cruel king, and then she looked at his weeping people. The king expected her to be afraid. He expected her to beg. But Anya closed her eyes and took a deep, steady breath. She did not sing for the king. She sang to the earth beneath his palace. This time her voice wasn't soft like a gentle river. It was sharp. It vibrated with the anger of 1,000 trampled forests. It was the sound of a roaring fire, of cracking stone, of a mountain waking up. The king laughed, thinking the rain was coming. But the clouds remained bone-dry. Instead, the ground beneath the palace began to violently fracture. The stone courtyard split wide open. From the deep cracks in the earth, massive, thick roots, the roots of the ancient Baobab tree from Kandy burst forward like giant wooden serpents. They tore through the stone, wrapping themselves around the iron cage and shattering it into pieces. The villagers of the Iron Kingdom shrieked and scattered as the roots bypassed them completely and raced up the palace walls. They wrapped around the king's high balcony, crushing the pillars like dry twigs. King Yarrow screamed as his palace of stone and iron crumbled around him, swallowed up by the very earth he had abused. When the dust cleared, the king was gone, his empire of greed brought to its knees. Anya stood in the center of the ruins, completely untouched. The giant roots gently lowered themselves, forming a beautiful, winding wooden path that pointed back toward the savannah. The people of the Iron Kingdom looked at Anya in absolute reverence. They didn't see a captive. They saw a liberator. Anya pointed to the broken soil, then to the sky, gesturing for them to plant new seeds and treat the land with respect. As Anya walked the long wooden path back to Kandy, the sky above the reformed kingdom finally cracked open, releasing a gentle, healing rain. The Baobab had not just protected its daughter. It had reminded the world that you can chain a human being, but you can never chain the spirit of the earth. Anya returned to Kandy not just as a storyteller, but as a legend. The villagers wept with joy, throwing red petals at her feet. But Anya did not celebrate. She walked straight past the crowds, past the fields, and stood once more before the great Baobab. The ancient tree was different now. Its leaves, once a deep emerald, were now tipped with gold a permanent reflection of the girl who had shared its soul. Anya placed her hands on the trunk, thanking the tree for her rescue. But the Baobab's voice rumbled softly, not with anger this time, but with a profound sadness. "My child," the tree whispered, its leaves rustling like old parchment, "you have broken the chains of a tyrant. But you have also shown the world a power that humans are not meant to possess. In time, others will come. More kings, more armies, more greed. They will hunt you, Anya, and they will destroy this land to get to you." Anya's heart sank. She looked back at her village, at the children playing in the dirt, at the elders laughing in the shade. She knew the tree spoke the truth. Her gift was a beacon, and a beacon always draws the wolves. She looked up at the Baobab and smiled a bittersweet smile. She had no words, but her eyes asked the question, "What must I do?" "Give your voice back to the earth," the Baobab replied. "Let it become a shield for your people, rather than a prize for your enemies." Anya nodded. She took one last deep breath of the savanna air. She began to sing her final song. It was the most magnificent melody the world had ever heard. It echoed across the plains, over the mountains, and down into the deepest rivers. As she sang, her body began to glow with a soft, golden light. The villagers ran toward the tree, sensing something was happening. "Anya!" they cried out, but they could not get close. A gentle, invisible wind pushed them back. As the final, breathtaking note left her lips, Anya's feet began to take root in the soil. Her arms stretched upward, turning into smooth silver branches. Her skin hardened into protective bark. She was not dying. She was transforming. Before the villagers' very eyes, Anya merged with the great Baobab, becoming a twin tree growing side by side with the ancient giant. A heavy golden mist burst from the new tree, spreading out in a massive circle, enveloping the entire village of Kundi. From that day on, the village of Kundi vanished from the maps of men. To any outsider, any greedy king, or any army looking for the magical village, there was nothing to see but an endless, impenetrable, thorny forest. The golden mist protected them, making the village invisible to those with malice in their hearts. Inside the mist, the villagers lived in perfect peace, never wanting for food or water. Anya was no longer an orphan girl who couldn't speak. She was the forest itself. And even today, if you travel deep into the African savanna, when the wind blows through the leaves of a twin baobab tree, you can still hear it.